welcome to the first episode of Eat, Sleep, Lift, Repeat. I'm your host, Charlotte Mitchell, and you might think that this is just going to be a fitness podcast. And the reason I chose Eat, Sleep, Lift, Repeat is it encompasses your food, so nutrition, sleeping for me is lifestyle, and then lifting is my form of exercise. So I chose that name, Eat, Sleep, Lift, Repeat, and we just keep doing those things over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do first off is I wanted to chat to you and introduce you to who I am. So where I've come from, sort of my motivations, and what's happened to me over my life to bring me to this day where I am presenting a podcast. And I'm really excited about this. It's very scary. It's a brand new thing to be presenting to you today, and I hope that you get value from it. So here goes. So I was born in 1983, so I'm 38, Pisces, for any of you that are interested. But yeah, so I've been on this planet for what feels like a long time. 1983 seems like a really long time ago. How the hell did that ever happen? But anyway, and I had a normal childhood. It was a normal family unit, mum, dad, brother. But the one thing that always happened sort of to me growing up was bullying through school. That was a massive, massive thing for me. When I was 10 or 11, we moved out to America and we lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved back, and it wasn't the easiest transition. I am highly introverted as a person. I find new situations really hard, we moved cultures, which was difficult. I remember it was few days into being into the new school, and my mum got a phone call saying that I wasn't settling very well and I wasn't very loud and talking, and obviously we just moved culture, so it was just a real shell shock to me, and actually made me go more inside myself as a person. And anyone that knows me knows that I can be quite loud at times now, but only in the situations that I feel comfortable with. If you put me in a situation I'm not comfortable with, then I'm pretty likely to grow very quiet, to want to sit in the corner and not have much to say about anything. I'm quite happy sort of sitting with my own thoughts. So yeah, it's a real hard thing, sort of moving cultures. And I found it very hard to make friends. I always found that sort of in school really, really difficult to make friends and to build relationships in that respect with people. And I was, like I said, I was bullied. When we came back from America, I went into a new school and I really didn't fit in. I'd gone in sort of at a point where they'd all gone through primary school together and come into secondary school, and I just got dumped in a couple of years into secondary school, and they all had their little groups, they were all together, and I didn't fit in. And so I pretty quickly got picked on. I had really bad skin as well, always growing up, really, really horrendous skin. And that's a really hard thing to deal with when outwardly you're really introverted and then have on that outside something that just is so visible. And I remember I used to get called the Toxic Crusader growing up by older kids, and I very quickly learned how to toughen up and to just try to not let their opinions get to me. But there's only so much you can do with that. It always eats away at you to an extent, you know, being called names, and children are cruel. Just being called names and picked on, and it's constant, and you just feel like you can't get away with it or away from it, and it makes you more introverted as a person, so you go more inside yourself. And it took me quite a few years to sort of settle into being at school, being in a new school, and finally sort of started to make some friends, and you know, growing up, and you sort of get to know who you are a little bit more, and life gets a bit easier. Stayed at the same school, sort of going through A levels, and then moved on to go to university. I studied equine business management, so that's horses and a bit of business management. And I did it just as something to do, basically. Nobody in our family had ever gone to university, so I just did it for something to do. And in hindsight, I would never have done it, knowing what I know now. But you don't know that at the time. And what's that saying? Like, hindsight's 2020. At the time, you think it's the right thing to do, so you go ahead and you do it. And I basically, again, found it very hard to make friends. It took quite a few months for me to settle into living in halls and just getting used to feeding myself and cooking for myself. And you know, you can go out and you can buy as much alcohol as you want, so we all went a bit crazy, and that's a running theme sort of through my life, is alcohol and using that as a bit of a crutch, which we'll go into in a bit. But yeah, uni was okay. I spent a lot of time sleeping, partying, and a little bit of studying here and there. And it was a good experience. I did make new friends, and just sort of got thrown into life, really. I stayed at uni. It was a 3-year course. Stayed there, did it, got a 2-2, I think. I didn't really study. I never really did that much work. I always did just what was necessary, because my motivations weren't really there to do it. I was just doing it because it was kind of the expected thing that you did after school. You go to university and you get a degree, and then you go out and you go to work, and then you meet someone, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and then you work, and then you retire, and then you die. And that's kind of what life milestones are like. And I very quickly have learned to sort of rebel against those lifestyle, those milestones that have come through. So I did uni. I went in and worked in an office. I started in finance, and I was basically sort of training to be an accountant because it's just what I fell into. I fell into a job that it was easy. I got the job. I hated every second of it. And when I was 23 in 2005, my best friend from uni, she was on her way to dinner at our house. I was with my boyfriend, I was with my fiance at the time, and she had a car crash about a mile down the road, and she never used to wear a seatbelt, and she went out the windscreen, and I'll never forget that day. I remember watching some ambulances and fire brigade and police just going hell for leather down the road past our house, and I remember phoning. I phoned her boyfriend to say that there'd been a crash or something had happened at the end of the road, and he picked the phone up and he said, yeah, we were in it and she's in a pretty bad way. And we drove down there, and she was in the middle of the road. Somebody else in the other car had been killed outright, and she was the other person in a bad way. She was still alive at that point, but sort of knowing the next day that it was only her body that was still alive. Her brain had gone at that point. It just took a couple of days for her body to catch up. And so she went to intensive care. We found the hospital that she was in the next day and went and saw her and saw her family. And she died later that day, or her body did anyway. And that was a real shock to life at 23, sort of realising this could happen. And I was engaged at this point. I was with somebody, and it was always that natural progression. You know, you're with somebody for a few years and people say to you, okay, you've been together for like 2 or 3 years, you know, when are you going to get married? And so you kind of, he asked, and I was like, okay, this is how life's supposed to go, isn't it? So I said yes. And then people started saying, you know, when are you going to have kids? And for me, like at 23, I was like, massive alarm bells started going off. And so when Ellie died, I basically ran a mile from my life. I quit my job. I bailed out of the relationship, which was the right thing to do, but it was still, you know, it was still hard to do that to that person. And I went and got a job on a yard. It was a live-in job. I lived on my own. I had my little dog with me, and I basically drank and drank and drank like crazy whilst I was working that job. I had huge amounts of guilt. I'd phoned to cancel on Ellie before they'd driven over. I phoned to cancel on her that evening for coming over for dinner, and she didn't pick the phone up. And when she did pick the phone up, they were on their way. And I said, no, it's fine, just come on over. And obviously, I suffered with that guilt, the fact I blamed myself, that I could have said, don't come. And would that have meant that she would have still been alive? You know, you just can't, it's so hard because you can't look back like that. But equally, you've got no choice but to look back like that and question your decisions and question your decision-making ability, and how, you know, how ethical it was to sort of say, you know, come on over anyway, even though I didn't want her to at that point. And you just, all of those things go through your head. And so I suffered with that, huge amounts of guilt for a very long time, and it's actually taken me years to get over that. So I stayed in that job for about 6 months, and it was hard. You know, I went straight into a really hard working environment, physically hard. I wasn't fit at that point for the work, but, you know, the work to me was a form of punishment. I worked harder and harder and harder to punish myself for the guilt that I was feeling, for the levels that I was drinking, and just to get through each day. And then I'd had enough sort of working on that yard. I'd started looking after her children more than the horses, so I found another job not too far away, get another live-in position, and started working there. And there I met the person that would become my next fiance. Sounds bad, doesn't it? But again, it's those natural progressions of relationships that people just think are going to happen. And so you go with the flow. And I met him in that job. And we spent a few years together. And whilst we were together, he nearly died of an aortic dissection. And at that point, you know, he said he was very scared. I was very scared. Again, you're getting throwbacks into all the other things of, you know, Ellie dying and stuff like that. And he asked if I wanted to marry him, and I was like, yeah, okay. You know, he was in hospital at the time, and it was, it's in a very emotional state, and you're very vulnerable, and the other person is very vulnerable, and at that point he only had a 20% chance of survival. So it seemed like the right thing to do. And then must have been about a year and a half later, it was 2010, he had another dissection, essentially a heart attack, and he died very quickly. And it was just possibly one of the most traumatic experiences of my life again. And so sudden, here one minute and then gone the next. And it brought up everything again, from Ellie dying and the guilt of that, to then David dying, and trying to process how and why somebody at 28 can just be gone, like literally here one day and then you click your fingers and then they're gone the next. And you can't process it. You try to process it, but it's incredibly difficult. And somebody, I read something the other day which really described it well, and it was basically that it's like breaking your leg, and your leg gets put back together, but it's never quite the same. And it always hurts when it's cold, and when you dance, you've got a bit of a limp, but you learn to just dance with the limp. And it's kind of the same when people go from your life like that, when they're suddenly ripped out of your life, and you have to assimilate that level of grief and the feelings of just not knowing why, and try and learn to assimilate it into your daily life, and just learn that it's part of you now, and it really can be what formulates some of the decisions that you make now on a daily basis. So I became very, very, very impulsive, tended not to want to wait for anything. I also went off the rails again heavily. I was partying a lot, so I was going out I'd go out on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and bearing in mind I was working in a 5.5 day week. I had my own business with horses again. I had a 20 stable yard. I was teaching, and I imploded. I was drinking again heavily every night, and that for me is a theme of a coping mechanism. When I emotionally can't cope with a situation, I will bury those emotions. I will numb them within alcohol. It's the easiest way for me to numb them. And so that's what I did. I just don't come out of that numbed state. Just drink. And that sort of keeps everything at bay. Doesn't make it go away, let me tell you, but it keeps it at bay. And so that happened, and I eventually, I pretty much imploded and ran away from that life. I'd had enough of working on the yard and how horrible everything had been, and I ran away out of another relationship that wasn't a good relationship anyway. It was very sort of emotionally abusive, and I'd had enough of it. And I pretty much made myself homeless overnight, and a really lovely dear friend took me in, and I lived with them for a year, whilst I sort of picked myself back up together, and then got a house, and spent a long time on my own, and again another long period of time drinking really heavily. Through that period, I would come home and just drink until I fell asleep, most nights. And I was dealing with trauma of years and years and years of trauma, and then finally being on my own and not being in a relationship. I bounced from relationship to relationship from 18 until about 33, never having dealt with any of the trauma that had happened. And I was finally on my own, and eventually I sort of said enough's enough, and in 2017 I had a year off drinking from the May bank holiday until about the June of the 2018. And I stopped. I had to. And that brought every single emotion to the surface. And had to learn how to deal with the pain and trauma and grief. Learn how to be alone with myself, with my own thoughts, to be comfortable with who I am, and to learn to like myself, then learn to love myself, and then learn to appreciate myself. And that is a long journey. Trying to learn to do that. And then I was still working with horses at this point, but I also sort of, when you stop drinking, you tend to get a really massive sweet tooth. I lost a lot of weight, but I was really pretty overweight at this point. I'd come out of a physical job where I could pretty much eat anything I wanted, and trust me, I really like food. So I ate everything I wanted when I came out of the physical job, and obviously the weight just piles on. When you do that, it's the only thing that can happen, is weight's going to pile on. So I sort of started doing YouTube workouts at this point and taking my health more seriously. But the way I did that, and I didn't realise at the time that this was the wrong thing to do, I sort of cut my calories really drastically. I really scaled right back, to the point that I was sort of having like a smoothie for breakfast, a few nuts and seeds in the middle of the day, and then a dinner. And I lost a huge amount of weight, but I was pretty much straight up and down. I was beanpole, because I was consuming probably about 1,300 calories a day. I was doing HIIT training as well, quite a few days of the week, so I wasn't doing any strength training, I was just HIIT training, thinking that was the right thing to do at that point. And yeah, real beanpole, but I thought that was amazing and how I should look, until I pretty much lost my period, because I'd fried my hormones, I fried my central nervous system, and I put myself into a massive energy debt that I owed to myself, and my body started to shut down. And when that started to happen, I got a bit scared. So I realised that maybe I was doing the wrong thing, so I started to look into things a little bit more, and then I thought maybe I should do my personal training qualifications. Now, I've coached all my life. I've been coaching for 20 years. I've just been coaching with riders with the horses. I have got a very good eye for coaching, building relationships. You know, I've taught most of my clients for years upon years upon years. And I get a huge amount of pleasure out of helping them achieve their goals. And as I took on my own health and fitness journey, they'd also started to ask me a lot of questions in regard to, like, you know, how can I get fitter? How can I lose more weight? Because I'd already gone on this journey. So it was sort of a natural progression to go and do PT qualifications. So I went and did them and realised they're really quite an easy qualification to get. Coming sort of out of an industry which is highly regulated, very hard to get qualified, to take on professional qualifications. This was a weird industry to come into, where they sort of give out the qualifications so easily, and then you're left on your own to go and coach people. And I found that really a little bit wrong, and scary. And I take my education, where that's concerned, really seriously. So I've since then sort of read and done as much as I can to keep bettering that knowledge, regardless of the fact that the industry says that you've got your qualification. And I really pride myself in doing that. But yeah, so I got qualified, and then obviously last year, COVID hit. So I decided, having sort of coached for so long anyway, and I know how good I am as a coach and how good I am at getting results for people, I took my business online. I started to do a little bit here and there, and then towards the end of the year sort of started to push it a little bit more. And then in January of this year, I sort of made it a lot more serious, and sort of started working with my business mentor and just developing the business. And throughout it all, I've always attracted, even through coaching generally with the horses as well, I attract normally the same kind of person. And it's often around the late 30s to early 40s and beyond female, and where the online training is concerned, all of them are normally in some kind of menopausal journey. So where that is, I sort of made the decision right back in June of this year that I now specifically coach that kind of person, because that's the kind of person I've always attracted. So why not sort of put everything out that I do towards that kind of person? So that's where I am today. Those are the people that I aim towards, and I still do in-person coaching with the horses. I still enjoy it. I still gain a lot from it. I love the one-to-one contact and watching them progress. These are people that go from everything from grassroots levels up to more advanced levels, and seeing them go out and achieve their dreams through coaching is pretty phenomenal, really. Anybody who's a coach who's listening to this will understand what it's like when you can help people to achieve their dreams, and see them flourish as a person is pretty phenomenal. And now all of that energy is becoming more channeled into helping women deal with feeling like they're losing themselves, and the journey in their life that has got them to where they are now, where they feel like they're not them anymore, and helping them regain who they are and who they want to be, whilst hopefully imparting some of the mindset I've learned to have over the years through the trauma and the grief. I hope that I keep imparting that onto them to help them. And I probably missed out like tons of stuff about my life, but that's the general nutshell anyway as to like who I am. And a lot of people won't know any of what I've said, because obviously I'm still very private as a person, still very introverted about things. Still don't want to necessarily let people in to sort of see what life's about, and what's sort of happened over the years. But this is sort of my way. I do this on Instagram as well. I use Instagram like a little bit as a way of like journaling, and this is going to be sort of another form of that. It's just talking to you about how I think as well, and how I've dealt with situations, alongside hopefully having some really exciting guests on, and we can like talk about lots of different subjects, which I'm really, really excited about. And I'm hoping that you will come along on the journey with me. It's a pretty scary one, doing this, putting yourself out there to whoever might actually just sit there and listen. So yeah, that's my life. But if you want to find me. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Charlotte Mitchell Coaching. If you do listen to this podcast, it would be amazing if you could share it to your story, share it on social media, tag me in it so I can see it. I really, really appreciate anybody that shares anything I do and pops a little tag on there, because then I can see it and then I can actually thank you for sharing stuff. I get so many DMs, messages, emails every day, but I endeavour to reply to everybody, and it's me that's replying to you. So yeah, if you do share this, I would be eternally grateful. And I will be dropping a new one at you again next week. Take care, and I will catch you later.